Hi folks, and welcome to the National Volunteer Week webinar for councils, Volunteering Trends. LGAQ is very pleased to be hosting this webinar, and we are very grateful for the assistance of our partners in this, the Queensland Government and also Volunteering Queensland. LGAQ would also like to recognise the traditional owners, the Yuggera people of the land on which we are broadcasting from, and we pay our respects to the elders past and present of all the nations that we are broadcasting to. To begin today, I would like to just let you know that the agenda, we're going to have a feature on emergency volunteering or the community response to emergency weather, general volunteering trends, workplace health, safety and your compliance obligations, as well as a look at some of the resources, research and training that's available to councils to support volunteers, but also to organisations in the use of volunteers. And lastly, we'll be looking at supporting community groups in your area and how important they are to your local disaster management from my perspective. Can I begin though by welcoming the Volunteering Queensland Chief Executive Officer, Perry Hembury, to say a few words.
Thank you, Michael. Hello everyone, I'm Perry Hembury, CEO of Volunteering Queensland, and it's my pleasure to provide a quick overview of National Volunteer Week for 2015. There's as I speak, you'll be on screen, you should see a happy snap, which is a shot that was taken from an earlier launch in the week, attended by Minister Shannon Fentiman, and you'll see there are a number of other participants. And you can get a sense of the theme of National Volunteer Week this year from all the smiley faces. This is the 26th National Volunteer Week in Australia, and it represents or presents the opportunity to highlight the value of volunteering to communities, to governments at all levels, and in fact to everyone. If we want to dwell on some very big picture statistics, we can talk about the 6 million volunteers right across Australia, around 1.2 million volunteers in Queensland alone, working in such diverse range of activities that it's almost incalculable. Nationally, volunteer effort has been quantified at contributing over $200 billion to the nation's economy. Such is the economic value of the work that's done. However, the theme of this National Volunteer Week is designed to convey the important message that volunteering is of equal value to individual volunteers themselves. Hence the theme, Give Happy and Live Happy. And just to demonstrate that, I might give you some what we call fun facts. We haven't made these up, folks. They come from surveys done by very credible academic institutions, and they are as follows. Volunteers are happier, healthier and sleep better than those who don't volunteer, so the surveys tell us. 95% of volunteers say that volunteering is related to feelings of well-being. Just a few hours of volunteer work makes a difference in happiness and mood. Sustained volunteering is associated with better mental health. Altruistic emotions and behaviours are associated with greater well-being, health and longevity. And a strong correlation exists between the well-being, happiness, health and longevity of people who are emotionally kind and compassionate in their charitable activities. The experience of helping others provides a sense of meaning, a sense of self-worth, and of course enables a social role and health enhancement. And lastly, volunteering is highly associated with greater health and happiness. So I'm sure you can see the theme right throughout those fun facts as they relate to elevated levels of happiness and health and well-being in people who participate in society and contribute to their communities. For all of those reasons, I can say without tongue in cheek that doctors should indeed prescribe volunteering to their patients. And I think we should recommend it to our friends, our families and ourselves. So them's the facts. We call them fun facts, but they're also really quite serious, I think, in terms of the health and strength of our communities and the evolution of civil society and social capital. Now, as with everything, it's not quite as simple as it seems, and I'm sure you know that. Volunteer programs need to be well-resourced, coordinated or managed, and there needs to be a commitment from the highest authority in each jurisdiction to make that happen. We need properly trained and qualified practitioners in the field, because all those fun facts won't be realised unless volunteer experience is satisfactory at the very least. At best, it should meet people's expectations that their volunteer work is valuable, relevant, and has social impact. In other words, it's making a difference. No matter what work is performed, and especially when it's involved in responses to natural disasters and the like, there needs to be the highest level of coordination in terms of work health and safety and the protection of property. So at Volunteering Queensland, we continue to knock on the doors of federal and state governments to properly resource us to fly these flags and to deliver high quality resources, including education and training right across the sector. It's a tall order, I know, in this economic climate, as I'm sure you're well aware. I hasten to add that the Queensland Government is committed to supporting National Volunteer Week, and indeed this webinar would not be possible without their generous financial support. And indeed, the generosity of LGAQ must be recognised as well. And I especially thank Michael, who's just beside me here at the moment. But to return to the primary purpose of the week, may I take this opportunity to send a huge thank you to those of you who volunteer yourselves and to those of you who are involved in the management of or support of volunteer programs in any way. Please don't forget to look for the new national standards for volunteer involvement that were launched earlier this week, which provide a framework for the best practice in volunteer program management for organisations of all types, sizes. Volunteering Queensland's website will direct you to a free download of those standards and those resources. So thanks for allowing me to take up a few minutes of your time during this webinar, and all the best to you for the rest of the week and beyond, as we all give happy and live happy. Thank you very much. Back to you, Michael.
Thank you very much, Perry. Volunteering Queensland and the Local Government Association of Queensland have been working on this for quite some period of time, and whilst the photo on your screen is perhaps a little unforgiving to me, it is the photograph that was taken at the signing of the MOU between the two organisations that essentially means that we're supportive of each other, we are working together to ensure the best possible outcomes, not just for councils, not just for volunteers, but for the broader community as well. So thank you for your time, Perry, much appreciated. Can I just say that the exciting thing that we're about to play for you is a National Volunteer Week special, our disaster video hub. It was a little while ago that Julie Malloy, the Director of Social Engagement from Volunteering Queensland, and myself had a chat about what volunteering is, what it means, and how it goes together. Stand by.
So, Julie, can I ask, what is Volunteering Queensland? How does it work?
Volunteering Queensland is the peak body for volunteering in Queensland. We're a reasonably small not-for-profit organisation, and we've been around for 30 years, increasing volunteering, supporting volunteer involving organisation, and trying to increase volunteering.
So it's not just about the individuals, the people, it's about the organisations and the agencies that use volunteers?
We do everything from professional development to nationally recognised training on board governance, for example, and volunteer management and coordination. And we also run workshops and provide help desk support to organisations that involve volunteers.
Julie, one of the important elements that you have is this thing called EV Crew. You better tell us, what does it actually mean? What do they do?
So EV Crew stands for Emergency Volunteering and Community Response to Extreme Weather. This is a service that we've been running since 2000. We run this service to allow community members to participate in their local communities' disaster-related activities in a safer and more coordinated way. There are various gaps that community members can fill that come up. So there's lots of great volunteering roles that many organisations have that require expert training, clear roles, and a lot of experience to do a lot more hazardous activities. And so there's great organisations like the SES and the Rural Fire and outreach programmes that Uniting Care and Red Cross and those guys all do. But we also know there's a lot of people out there that can still help but maybe don't have the badge and the uniform or the time to commit to those kind of activities. So what we do is we register them. They've stuck their hand up to help and say, look, we can help, call me if you need me. So we maintain a database of them. But it's more than a database. We engage with them throughout the year, at least quarterly, providing them with information on preparedness and resilience information, trying to build community resilience to natural disasters. And we encourage them those opportunities to update their details or deregister from us as well. So we are dealing with more current information. At the same time, that service provides support to organisations that may need a bit of extra help.
So it's an augmenting of existing services as well. It's not replacing, it's not working over the top of,
Nope.
it's in support of existing volunteer organisations?
Absolutely. It's here to support traditional organisations that have traditional volunteer recruitment practice, but at the same time they may need a bit of extra help. And this is something that no organisation really has been doing. We work with the existing emergency management systems and provide safer opportunities for people to help in a way that's wanted by the local community and needed. So it's based on need.
Volunteering is a really important conceptual framework of activity. Can you tell me how important is it in terms of building local capacity and particularly what does it mean for community resilience?
It's a pillar of building community resilience. We like to think we've been building community resilience for more than 30 years, and we know community engagement and community involvement and the importance of connection. So to allow individuals to participate in their own community's preparation and recovery is actually really important. It builds connectedness and a social memory and an opportunity to bond and connect in a way that's really meaningful to that local community. And they may form all sorts of connections out of that going forward. They actually might really enjoy the experience if it's managed and coordinated well, so much so that they are inspired to get involved again somehow or in a new way in their community. We know, in fact, from research that's taking place in recent times that a large portion of the community volunteers that have helped in recovery were actually doing it for the very first time. And we didn't expect that. We thought, they will do lots of things around community, but that was the first time they actually thought about doing something like that. And if they've had such a rewarding experience, they are inspired to do something else. So volunteering alongside amazingly trained volunteers is actually a great potential recruitment avenue for traditional organisations that have required training and so on, and they say, those guys were amazing, I'm going to go and do that too, and they're motivated to join.
As important as that is, and I mean it's obviously a terrific thing if we can involve them, but there's also a general capacity build and a general resilience across the community, just that people were able to be involved and feel engaged with looking after themselves almost and looking after each other.
It's a really good way to include them in the disaster management process. Everyone has a responsibility and should be taking ownership of their actions in terms of preparedness, but also they can contribute to response and recovery if they're included in that journey in ways that are appropriate for that type of role, and they can add value and feel valued, and actually it can help those organisations when times are tough.
And at the local level, this is really important, that it's not just about doing things for the community, but it's really vitally important for us to do things with the community. And this is a real opportunity of that engagement in a meaningful way from our perspective as well as
from what we know from our grassroots engagement is people want to know what's going on, and if they don't know what's going on because there's not been timely or consistent communication, they will perceive a need. And they will then go on to address that need themselves. That's been since the dawn of time. That's humanity.
It's the way we fundamentally operate.
So that's why messaging with counselling is really, really important given the key role councils have in the disaster management arrangements.
So it's important to have not just consistent messaging, but also a consistent process and a way that people can meaningfully engage with that system.
Exactly, and having clear pathways and having that clearly communicated can help people really understand what's going on around them. We know that's something that people are really interested in finding out, but they don't live in the disaster management world, they don't know the terminology, they don't understand the disaster management arrangements, and they will perceive a need and they will go out there and meet that need. That's what humans do. Since they don't have time, they will help each other if they think that's the right thing to do. And it's interesting in these times when we now have social media that instantaneous platforms can appear and people can connect instantly, whether it's from a point of truth or not.
Yeah.
So it's important the key messaging's there, and we want to help council with that as well.
There's a whole range of really great ways of engaging with volunteers and getting systems and structures right and communicating well with them. We inevitably have, though, the issue of spontaneous volunteers, and we don't know how to deal with them really well if they're just emerging without a demand or a request. What advice have you got for councils in relation to this?
I think over the years it has been an issue to be dealt with, and it doesn't have to be. It can be something that's part of your processes and how you deal with it to benefit your community actually, and it goes back to key messaging and the timeliness of those messages. You let people know what's happening and when it will be happening, and if there's a need or if there's not a need.
Yep.
That will determine a lot of behaviours that then take place. So you will not have people flying in from other countries, other parts of the country, other parts of the state to help when they're not needed. And then you've got to deal with that when they're there. So if you can get the messaging right and say this is how you're going to be working, this is what's going on, and include people in that journey and push that messaging out, that will help mitigate emergent risky behaviours that take place.
That's a really useful way of, if we've got the systems in place, if we get those messages out. But what if we don't? What if it just suddenly happens without us expecting it or anticipating it? It could be on social media, Facebook or Twitter feeds that just call people to arms almost. What happens then? What can we do about that?
A lot happens then, and there's a lot you can do about it. People are just trying to help. That's always the place it's coming from. At the end of the day, they're thinking there's a need and they want to help, and they're using whatever tools at their disposal to help with that. We have had instances in the past where Twitter feeds, Facebook pages, blogs, well-intended people become overwhelmed with the amount of traffic they're receiving. They don't understand the duty of care they now have over the connections they're making, and there's not enough appropriate health and safety information out there around what's happening and what to do. On the ground it won't be properly coordinated, there'll be no health and safety, council won't be covered by insurance. If a volunteer hurts themselves, council have no way of knowing if that volunteer was volunteering through council or if it was through some other activity, and they'll still come back to your CEO and say, I was volunteering in your council area to help that community and something serious has happened to me and I want my health insurance paid for, or worse. And we have had that situation happen in Queensland in recent years, and there was no way for the council to know if that person had volunteered with them or not. So if you actually go through a process, you can actually see who was sent where, what for, how long, and every interaction against them as well.
So in some ways this isn't just good for the volunteers and good for the community, but it's also good for us as a council. Yep. In terms of some risk mitigation for ourselves. Yes. As well.
Absolutely. So if they choose to use our service, we can provide them with a list of people that have confirmed for their volunteering activities. We will support them with how they set up the coordination with that, giving them advice and making sure that they're ticking off things to cover their backs in terms of a kind of risk management process.
EV Crew, we've got a bit of a picture of what it means and what it does. How can it work with councils? How can it help councils?
So we've helped quite a number of councils over the last number of years with lots of different ways to help them. Sometimes it's just support with key messaging on what they should think about saying and when they should say it, to manage public expectations of community involvement and disaster recovery. And there is a heightened expectation these days that people want to get out and do things, and you know, with social media platforms they have an instant voice and how that can happen. So we want to support councils to enable an effective recovery or even response, including community in that journey, and it's about timely, consistent comms out there, so we can help them with that, but also we can help become their buffer. So if it looks like there's a disaster coming your way, you can say, anyone who's interested in helping, come to us. And that means their phone lines are not being clogged up by people saying, do you want a cupcake, or I want to go here, where do you want me to go? We're managing that influx of offers of assistance for them, which allows them to focus on their real need on the ground. And then when they know what those needs are, they can come back to us and say, okay, we're going to need a certain amount of volunteers to do this type of activity. And that's quite far ranging. And we've had very small scale groups of 4 or 5, 3 or 4 in some areas, or they want specific skill sets, and it's very sensitively managed. And then we've had large scale, thousands of people just doing general stuff that's coordinated as well.
So that's really important for a lot of councils, that it's not just about saying no, it's not about saying no, not now, but it's about having this pool or ready reserve of people that you're developing for them.
Yeah, and we can engage any kind of key messaging out to them on behalf of council, and council may not want to do that, and that's okay. There might not be a need, and it should be based on that local need. And what we try to do is match local people to local activity. And an example of that even was just a couple of weeks ago. We were asked to help with extra sandbagging before a disaster happened, and that's something the council and the SAS do really, really well, but with really kind of crappy conditions out there, and they needed just a few extra bodies in different locations to help with that. And you don't need years of training to fill a sandbag. You can be taught in 15 minutes maximum how to do that. So we were able to go to our registered volunteers, and I was able to actually match someone in the same street as where that was taking place and say, look, actually there's some stuff going on, he's still interested, and he said, yeah, I'm going to come, and I'm going to bring my 16-year-old son and tell him to go off the couch and come and do it too.
That's about as local as you can get, really.
Yeah.
You know, really have an understanding now of how important VQ is, and you know, how you can help us. How big's VQ? Like, how many volunteers do you work with, and how do you help us, you know, on a day-to-day basis with these people?
We actually have a small team of paid staff at Volunteering Queensland, but we have an amazing team of volunteers that we use as an organisation. We like to practice what we preach, and we bring volunteers in ourselves. So we have more than 500 volunteers trained up on our emergency volunteering service, and they will receive calls of registrations, and they will make calls out to match volunteers in the community to organisations' requests as it happens. And that's something that we scale up and down as disasters happen and not. But the service itself is 365 days a year. You can register online, you can deregister online yourself, and organisations will always be able to come to us for support and advice throughout the year, not just in times of disaster. In terms of the amount of referrals we've made through our service, since 2011, we've made more than 30,000 referrals out to community organisations and councils.
In the language of government, we call them points of contact and what have you. 30,000 individual people doing something out there in a volunteer capacity. Yeah, and that's just an initial referral for one opportunity. We know many of those volunteers then went on to volunteer the next day and the next day and the next day. That's a truly amazing number. It's pretty awesome, and people are excited that they were able to add value to their local community, and we were excited to allow that to happen in a more coordinated fashion. Julie, thank you so much for your time. This has been really important for us and for councils to better understand Volunteering Queensland, your role, and how we can better engage with and work with volunteers across the range of disaster management before, during, after. It almost doesn't matter in a lot of ways. Have you got any questions for me?
I do, and this is a question that we get asked quite regularly by different councils that we work with. If there's a major disaster that's happened and we are supporting them and their community, the councils often ask me, will this be eligible for claiming under NDRRA arrangements? And I would love to be able to give them a more concise answer, and you've always got the language to help with that. So can you explain in council terms how that works?
Sure. It's not a straightforward answer, I guess, is part of the problem that we face with NDRRA. So there are components of it that are not very well understood. The first one is the difference between disaster declaration and the activation of NDRRA. In essence, the disaster declaration is irrelevant to whether or not the service may be eligible for NDRRA as an activity. Most importantly, this is about when councils are requesting it and what they're going to use it for. The important element to it is that it's part of the counter-disaster operations. So whether it's clean-up, whether it's emergency response activities, whether it's initial recovery activities, it sort of doesn't matter. It's about the period of time within which it occurs needs to be part of those counter-disaster operations.
So when a council says to me, how do we, I ask them to do an RFA, and so it's lodged in the system, and I'm led to believe that's quite straightforward. How does that work?
Again, really important to my friends in council land, the RFA is not just a piece of paper that enables you to provide that service to them. It's also about providing the paper trail that tracks the request, the service that's provided, and any associated costs with it. So it's also an audit as well as a request component of the system. More importantly, I think from your point of view, is that it's really clear about what is being asked for. So the most important thing about the RFA from an operational point of view is that it's clear, and it doesn't say we need 50 chainsaw operators, but it rather says we need to clear an area of road, and you can then match volunteers that are best suited to achieve the outcome rather than respond to a specific request.
Great.
So hopefully that video gave a few very important answers to some difficult questions sometimes in relation to emergency volunteering from a local government perspective and how we best use them. But I guess a couple of the key points to remember from that is that there's a rise in the use of episodic or short-term volunteering, and I guess that's one of the key things that we're not used to from traditional emergency services and emergency volunteering point of view. Sometimes they're seen as unskilled or no real involvement in traditional volunteering, but often what we're doing is we're opening up a range of people who wouldn't normally be part of the system. I guess engagement with the community response to extreme weather is a really important element for councils, because it's going to give us a greater range of access to the sorts of volunteers who may not normally be available. Increasing preparedness and building resilience within the community. Excellent question, Alan. VQ a statewide service that's available to support any council, indeed any agency, but certainly from a local government point of view and from a LGAQ point of view, this is available to all councils across Queensland. It may not mean that you have a local crew team available to you, depending on where you are, but it certainly doesn't mean that Volunteering Queensland can't help with a range of activities, some of which we're going to get to in just a couple of minutes. So I guess the other things that we need to keep in mind is that volunteering is a very different world from what it was not all that long ago. We've seen a massive increase in the number of volunteers. So you think about it in terms of the overall population of the country, from a mere 24% of people in 1995 up to some 36% of the population who are volunteering. The other thing that we know is particularly when we look outside the southeast corner, these are much higher rates of volunteering in rural and remote areas, regional centres, than it is in the big cities of the world. So we're certainly seeing that the availability of people to volunteer is increasing, but the nature of them is quite different. So what we've seen, I guess, is a shift to self-organised volunteers. This is something that wasn't unexpected, but certainly wasn't a part of the traditional emergency services range of how they were going to engage well with people. We've also seen, I guess, what we might call the reflective volunteering style. So it's a little bit less driven, and it's sometimes harder to predict where people will want to be involved. Sometimes seen as cause-driven, and this idea of social enterprises is one of those that is becoming increasingly common and increasingly popular. The new breed of volunteer, and I guess this is one of those things that we really do need to look at and understand better. So we see that they're often there for a shorter period of time. We don't see this new breed of volunteer being the person who signs on to be a lifelong member of an organisation. We see that they are much more individualistic personally, but also from the point of view of what it is that they're interested in supporting and how they're going to do it. And a very difficult thing for us to manage within a systemic volunteering organisation is the desire for much greater autonomy and an ability to participate in the decision making. The greater reward of the personal benefit as opposed to some kind of a systemic benefit is one of those things that it's sometimes a little difficult to understand. But we also see, I guess, this shift in loyalty to causes and projects rather than to an overall sense of what we mean by volunteers. So this growth, but also a decline in the average number of hours being volunteered. So what that can sometimes mean for us is that, particularly when we're looking at younger volunteers, volunteers who are students or who are involved in full-time work anyway, we tend to see them respond to a particular state of events or a particular cause that they personally identify with, which sometimes makes it difficult for them in terms of general volunteering into an established organisation, but makes the idea that they can respond to a need and address that need or meet that need in the immediate present tense a very appealing one for them. So sometimes these changes are driven by something as simple as the modern life. So we live, we work in the 21st century, we have time and various other pressures that are placed upon us in terms of when we are free and how free we can be. And we certainly see this, particularly with the Generation Y, that this is much more about a capacity to respond rather than signing up for a long period of time. In terms of corporate volunteering, we continue to see this grow, but it's a very diverse range of activities, and sometimes we will see organisations that will foster their own volunteering strategy and volunteering program within them. It can often mean that we have the luxury of some very skilled and particular skills bases available to us, sometimes for a short period, depending on what that corporate structure is that underpins it. Particularly though, one of the important factors in relation to this is that people are drawn to the opportunity to volunteer within their corporate structure, where sometimes they'll actually be paid to undertake it. So it won't necessarily be volunteering in the truer sense of the word, but they'll still be on their salary to undertake a volunteering activity within the community. That can have some real impacts in terms of how we understand and how we work with volunteers more generally. Digital volunteering is one of those fascinating new worlds of volunteering where some people can see an opportunity to participate entirely in their volunteering remotely, whether it's via email, via the internet, intranet, connected devices, your PC, your smartphone, and it brings into, I guess, question our understanding of what a volunteer is. So if it's not physical boots on the ground, are they really volunteering is one of the questions that we often find ourselves asking. But some of the skill sets that they can bring, whether it's something as simple as the opportunity to offer translation or interpretation services, which may not just mean another language, but an explanation of what the document might be in the common language, whether it's training, research, a whole range of activities that can be undertaken without a physical presence being necessarily required. The other sorts of ones that we often see are data management, where we are tracking and keeping a reporting arrangement in place, as well as facilitation, coordination, and the dissemination of information within the world. I guess, the broad sense of it from a local government perspective is recognising and understanding how this may be the sort of volunteering that is enormously useful, both because of its flexibility, but because it's not bound by any particular boundaries or any particular location. This is a service that can be provided in a very remote locations and, if necessary, even from very remote into other areas. I guess one of the other areas is the involvement or engagement, where we will see government in many environments relying much more heavily on community-based organisations, traditional volunteer organisations, and what we would, I guess, regard as non-traditional volunteer organisations to undertake a range of activities. We certainly see from a local government perspective, within the current disaster recovery, the expectation that local capacity will be fully expended or fully exhausted, or at very least fully engaged. Now, here's an opportunity for us to better understand what our community has and how it can work. But at the same time, it may be a bit of a disincentive for us in terms of how we then get additional corporate support, or more importantly, in some instances, support from government itself. Competitive tendering was another one of those that sometimes gets in our way in relation to the engagement of the community and better understanding what those needs are and how we can meet them from a range of non-government community-based organisations. In terms of some of the barriers to better volunteering, I guess the key role of local government in working with local volunteer organisations, be they well-known, well-established NGOs or local community-based organisations, this is an important opportunity for us to actually be some of the fixers, some of the mechanisms by which we can fix and overcome some of the barriers. Certainly us at LGAQ, we're working very closely with Volunteering Queensland to identify, understand, and where we can, work towards overcoming many of these barriers. The important thing, I guess, is that these barriers are not stoppers. They're problems that we need to overcome, and sometimes the nature of the volunteer that we are engaging with of themselves overcome some of these particular organisational problems about how we're going to better deal with the volunteers. The particular one that I want to talk to is, I guess, the lack of understanding in relation to how we recruit and handle episodic volunteers, and certainly that is one of the key elements in our engagement with Volunteering Queensland about how we can provide a framework, a support structure, a coordination set of arrangements, and also a recruiting set of arrangements for the episodic or the spontaneous volunteer to assist the community. Here's my key message, I suppose, to you, that you're the expert. We at local government level, we at agency and organisational level, we are the experts and we are relying heavily on the support and lost sound? We're back online. Sorry, momentarily we lost some connections there. So I guess what I'm doing is I'm calling on councils to be the experts in volunteering management within the council environment. How can you contribute to this? How can we at the local disaster management group, at the local coordination centre, and certainly with our local community-based organisations within each of our towns and areas and regions, how can we be the enablers rather than reinforcing and running up against the barriers. How can we work on that? So some of the things from a local government perspective may be about how we undertake our planning, how we have identified the agencies and organisations who are part of the local disaster management planning and arrangements, and certainly from a big picture point of view, how we engage with the volunteering organisations such as Volunteering Queensland or other local organisations about getting people in who are offering to provide support and assistance to them within the environment. Let me just be absolutely clear, workplace health and safety and compliance still applies. Where council is involved in the recruiting, we have a responsibility, particularly if we are going to be the host organisation for spontaneous or episodic volunteering, we have a responsibility as much as if they were an officer of council and volunteering directly with us. So keep that in mind. This is not something that just goes away under the super disaster management legislation. As Julie said in the video, there's also some key compliance factors. I'm going to very quickly give you an overview of some of the resources that are available. So in other words, we are not on our own. There is a central resource that's available. Go to Resource Central at volunteeringqueensland.org.au. These documents, these assistance guidelines and resources are available for you today. Please make use of them. There's also a whole heap of information about how we can do this better, how we can engage, how we can identify, how we can manage, how we can be part of the system rather than simply calling on assistance from outside. All of these websites will be available on the VQ publication, and contact Volunteering Queensland. They'll give you all of this information and access to all of these pages. Volunteering Queensland released a new set of community resource handbooks. These are, I'm sorry, I've skipped one ahead. Volunteering Queensland, mentioned by Perry, these are the information tools that are available for how we can establish accredited trainees through registered training, nationally recognised registered training programs to provide local management of the volunteers. These resources are available. They're available now. They link into the core business of council, the core opportunities for volunteers. From my perspective, of course, during disaster management, but these are the sorts of ways that we can engage volunteers into the day-to-day business of our communities, the day-to-day business of our councils. Linky is the online platform where volunteers are registered and where where Volunteering Queensland keep a record of the volunteers that are available. They upload a profile, they make themselves available to the system, and this is I would suggest a great tool, and I encourage or thank Volunteering Queensland for putting this together. Lastly, give happy, live happy. You can get a certificate. We should be recognising our volunteers here around the country, and certainly from my perspective in terms of local volunteers that are making themselves available to our local community. Can I just say my time is up. I thank you very much for your attendance. Can I also bring in my colleague? I thank my friends from Volunteering Queensland. It's a great opportunity for us to be working together. It's been a great time. I thank Perry. I thank our Volunteering Queensland friends, Vanessa, Nihar, Daisy, and Faye, and also my very good friend Julie Malloy. I had some people to thank from in here, Wilson, my web and communications team. These kind of webinars, despite my lack of presentation skills, they don't just happen automatically. They need those people to come together. More importantly, I thank you guys out there for joining us and for participating. Can I just say to Ellen, talk to VQ. VNQ is an organisation that is an important local organisation within your structure. A lot of what I've been talking about is service that's available through VQ, and V&Q have access to the vast majority of it. But can I just say, talk to VQ, they will give you access into the state system, but also into those local arrangements. I'm out of here. See you later, folks. Thank you. Thanks, Perry.
Thank you, Michael. Great pleasure to work with you. Thanks for your support.
Bye.